I'm super excited to be with you guys here on this episode of the Mantra Corner. First of all, I would just like to give a big warm shout out and thank you to Leo. Your work has inspired many, and I just wanted to take a moment to offer you this gratitude for the opportunity to have this discussion and talk about some of these really, really important things, and to just hopefully open up a conversation and engender shared knowledge and communion. And nonetheless, I first came across you, Leo, about 2.5 months ago, I think. A friend of mine just sent me one of your videos, and I was really impressed at the quality of the depth of what you were talking about. And I think it was probably a video from within the last year or so, but it intrigued me, and it kind of got me into this loop of, your playlists and things. And I ended up watching, kind of like binging on about maybe 20 videos or so. And I felt like I really got to see your journey, and, and going from this sort of starting out point of being like kind of a skeptical agnostic of sorts, but very much into the personal development arena. And you had a clear ability to express your points and to transmit the knowledge of what you were discovering on your own through your own inquiry and meditative practices and things. You could see you started to go more towards meditative practices and spiritual awakening and things like that over the years, and particularly I think in the recent year or two. And it's been very interesting. Like I said, I've only had this condensed view of what you've done, but it was very neat because I saw a lot of parallels on our own journeys, and it was just very cool to watch this person go from skeptic to spiritually awakened individual, and to now having attained, beginning at least to attain God realization, which is the height or the pinnacle of all spiritual practice as far as I'm aware. It has been said that the realization of one's own self as divinity or as God is the highest attainment, and there can be nothing higher. But again, as you spoke about in your video, there can be many, many layers of depth to these realizations, and that's what we're going to discuss some of. And I'm not really going to get into a whole comparison about depth and levels of depth, but I'm more interested in comparing the context of the realizations and seeing where we may converge and where we might diverge. And hopefully that will engender some conversation and spark some imaginative responses from our viewers, and begin to continue the work that we were both doing and have been called to do. It's very powerful, man. I just wanted to, again, thank you again. Your work has definitely inspired me. I've seen the quality of what you've put out, and it has caused me to want to raise the bar on my own work. So, nonetheless, but one of the things I thought was really important to mention is that we both kind of start from the same point. You mentioned in this latest video, and I think you've mentioned it perhaps in others, about your deep, deep desire for truth, and this almost insatiable need to discover the truth of reality and to uncover deeper and deeper levels of this truth. That same feeling has been operating in me for a long, long time. In fact, it all started around, I think it was about 19 years ago. I found myself on the floor of a cell in Broward County, Florida, just on my knees in total surrender. And I had been broken. I mean, I had lost everything that I had. I lost all my possessions, all my cool ass gear, my DJ equipment, everything you could imagine that was my life at the time. I lost my girlfriend, who was the love of my life at the time. I was losing my health, and I was losing my mind. Actually, being in that situation was ripping me to pieces, and I knew that there was no way out. I was going to be stuck there for a minute to contemplate these things. And the thing was, it gave me pause. It really gave me pause, because that moment, a huge transformation began. I looked at my life, and for the first time I realized I can no longer blame anyone. Blaming others and being a victim That's what got me here. So I can't do that anymore. I'm not going to do that anymore. As painful as it might be, as horrible as it might feel, I'm going to accept whatever has happened in my life, and from here on out, whatever happens. I'm going to accept it as if I created it. And I also surrendered to God, to truth, to love, to reality, to whatever it was. I didn't know. I couldn't name it. I hadn't experienced it, but I felt there must be something. And if there is anything, I need to surrender and ask, because I have no other recourse. There's nothing else for me. The only thing that I want, I didn't ask for a way out. I knew I had gotten myself where I was, and I knew I was going to have to deal with it. The only thing I asked for was truth. I said, I don't care about anything else. I just need to know what is the truth. And I think that sparked a series of events in my life, because I think that anytime we call upon the divine with the utmost sincerity, with the willingness to lay down all our preconceived notions, because I knew that's what I had to do. If I was really going to want to know the truth, I had to realize that whatever the hell I thought in the past, I can't go by that anymore. I got to drop that. I got to drop my ego about it. I got to drop my self-righteousness about all the things that I know to be right and why things are fucked up this way and how it's not my fault and all this shit. I knew I was going to have to drop all of it, every bit of it, and all the craftiness and all the cleverness that I thought that I knew. It all amounted to nothing at that moment. In that place, wasn't helping. It wasn't helping me for what I wanted, which was freedom. I wanted freedom. I wanted inner freedom. Sure, I wanted freedom on the outer, but that was not to come until later. But at least if I could find a way to be free inside. So that began my dedication to truth. This search for liberation. In any case, I wound up going a little bit through the system and ultimately finding my way into an institution where I remained for several years. And it was my good fortune while I was there to encounter, because I studied quite a bit. I studied all the religions I could find. I went to all the services I could. I read all the spiritual books that I could find. I continued to study. I meditated. I prayed. I did whatever I could. But I also did it all with this skeptical attitude, this not knowing. I'm not sure. I'm not clinging to any old beliefs. I'm not clinging to any dogma. I want to know the truth. I have to let that go. I'm a seeker. So I don't know where the truth is, right? But I'm open to discovering it. And I'm going to look everywhere that I can think to look. I looked in philosophy. I looked in the East. I looked in the Tao. I looked in Islam. I looked in the Kabbalah. I looked in the ancient scriptures of India. I looked in Zen. I looked in Buddhism. I looked in Jainism. I looked back in Christianity. Continued to look back and forth, east and west, as far as and as deep as I could. And I happened to come in contact with a lineage of ancient yogis. They basically, this is not the type of hatha yoga that you're used to seeing. Like it's not like hot yoga or stretching or any of these asanas. These are people who they dedicated their entire lives, everything about their lives, to discovering the ultimate truths, and worked hand in hand with many of the ancient practitioners of Buddhism and the ancient forms of Hinduism. And they all shared knowledge, and they all came to certain realizations, and then certain schools came to higher realizations. And this kind of reminded me of what you had spoken about, in what was it? I think it was around minute 16, 20. I know I took some notes. I took a lot of notes because I actually watched your video twice. It was that powerful. It was extraordinarily powerful. And it moved me many, many times. But, you talked about this realization of emptiness as being a limitation that some people, thought this is the greatest realization. And again, I can totally relate to that, because in the system that I studied, they put forth these 36 tattvas, for instance, what they're called. And these tattvas are levels of reality, or basically ways of experiencing ultimate reality. And it's from humanity all the way up to God. And then, so if you started at, let's say, humanity at the lowest level, and then you arose through spiritual practice to reach the level of emptiness, that might be a level of, let's say, 30 on this scale. But there are still 30 levels of higher awakening above that. And if you thought that was the top, you would stop there. And you would never realize that higher attainment is possible. So I totally concur with your statement there. And also, you even speak at the 21:30 mark, I believe it is. Oh, no, sorry. At 2 hours and 3 minutes, you begin speaking about another dimension of reality that opens up, that you realize that all of this linear awakening that you had been on was one dimension, and that there were all whole other dimensions of reality that were ineffable, unnameable. That also corresponds with the level of Tattva 0, which was only taught in the very most esoteric mystery schools, which they call it the level of Sri Paramashiva. And it also is thought to be, or is said to be rather, when experienced, ineffable, unnameable. It's beyond imagination, it's beyond words, and it cannot be conveyed. It cannot be spoken about. So there we have another parallel in understanding and realization. There are many, and we're going to get to a lot of them. But we're going to also get through some of this history. So, first of all, again, from victim to victory, I was there in that jail cell and feeling a victim, completely surrendered, and launched me on my path to realization. Now, there's a difference here in timeline because, with the 5-meo DMT, you're dealing with something that's instantaneous. You want to take it, you want to go there, you do it, boom, it's there. You manage to find it, you procure it, and then you imbibe it, and you are right there in the middle of it. So that is something that's very, very unique to it, and I thought it was imperative to point out and highlight that. So there is a matter of procuring it. It might be, it's very little known still, and might be somewhat difficult to obtain initially. Of course, all things, all treasures truly worthwhile, right? Are worth searching for a little bit. You got to be willing to put in some kind of effort as a seeker. So many people just want these realizations handed to them. They just think there's got to be some easy method, right? So I want to touch on that also. While 5-meo may be this radically instantaneous method, I don't for 1 minute mistake it to be easy. I can imagine, and I can compare with my own experiences, the intensity of an experience that has the power to transform one radically in a short period of time is very, very powerful. And it is not easy. It is certainly not an easy thing to undergo these transformations rapidly. So While my own journey from my initial Kundalini awakening, which began about 17 years ago, I started to experience these awakenings continuously, but they would come in small jolts and spontaneously without me doing anything. So once it began to be awakened, it began to take on a life of its own. So sort of like the way that you went and took your amount and went through your trip, I would be just sitting there in a blast of energy, my Kundalini energy, which let me get into that. Let me explain what that is just a little bit. So it's basically the power of God concentrated in the form. So God's in the system that we study, that I study. God manifests as everything, of course, right? But when he manifests in different forms, we call it by different names. And this is just to differentiate so that we can have an understanding, sort of to lay the map of this consciousness, the map of consciousness, so that we can lay that out and it becomes easier to navigate through these experiences and to make sense of them. So in her form as manifestation, we call her Shakti. That is God's own universal energy. And in her contracted form, when she resides in dormancy, in a dormant state, coiled at the base of the spine of every human being, that energy lies in an extremely condensed form, and we call it Kundalini. When the Kundalini begins to be released, we now also refer to it as Shakti, and what it happens is it begins to rise up the Sushumna Nadi, which is the central channel of the body's meridian system, the subtle energy system within the body. Within every human body has this. It's just whether or not it's awakened or whether or not it's opened, whether or not you have access to it consciously. So when through certain spiritual practices or through grace or through self-effort, whatever form it takes, Kundalini becomes awakened, it begins to arise through this central channel, and it begins to pierce all of the chakras, all of the energy centers, and all the meridians, and it begins to purify them as it does so. When it does that, when it begins to encounter, it encounters these things that we call samskaras, which are basically impressions left by experiences in life, over lifetimes, many lifetimes perhaps. These experiences were not fully digested or fully understood in the moment that they occurred, and so they cause a negative impression in us. It's almost like a trauma. It is a trauma. And these traumas get held literally in our energetic system, and we see the world through them largely. We see the world colored by the rays, rather colored by the diffuse, distortion that these samskaras overlay. They're like filters. And so the Kundalini in its active form as Shakti begins to clean them out and begins to purify us. And we begin to have deeper and deeper realizations into our own true nature and into the nature of reality. And all of this happens spontaneously, more or less, but it's like I said, it's a combination of grace and self-effort that are required. It's very important not to underestimate the power of either of these and the necessity of both of them. Because if we think it's all grace, I can just rely on the grace of the guru and the grace of God, and I don't really need to do anything, we won't progress. We won't be willing to look at our shit. We won't really be willing to do what's necessary to transform. We have to take responsibility for what we can do, okay? But we also have to appreciate there is so much that we cannot do. As you spoke about, Leo, it is the love that transforms us. It is the love of God that transforms us. But you had to be willing to put in those years of effort, those years of study, those years and years of study, practice, effort, trial and error, and then you were able to get to the point to where you were ready to have those experiences that you had on the 5-MeO. So I don't want anyone to mistakenly think they could just take 5-MeO a bunch of times and have God realization. It's going to probably be very, very difficult if they haven't done a lot of spiritual work. They probably will get to a point to where they can't go any further because it would become too horrific and too painful for them. Especially because they haven't developed a capacity to release. They haven't developed the capacity to accept and surrender at deeper and deeper levels. If you think surrender is easy, let me tell you, in the beginning it is not easy. It is difficult. But you get to a point to where it's kind of like your only card that you have left you can play, because you're faced with a power that is so great. There's simply no other intelligent response. Or you're facing a pain that's so great and so deep inside that the only thing you can do is surrender. So, in surrender, we have the opportunity, for instance, to surrender to the guru. And that's often a spiritual practice that is done in the East, in many yoga lineages. But if it's misunderstood, it can become an ego trip. It can become a power struggle. It can become very endangering to somebody to blindly follow, to begin to give over one's autonomous capacity to another. But luckily, in the lineage that I encountered, I was privileged to study under a true guru, or Sadguru. And one of the main things that he always stressed and always taught was that you always must understand that the true guru is the inner guru. There's the inner guru and the outer guru. So the outer guru is the one who, for all intents and purposes, is the head of the lineage. He makes sure, or she makes sure, that the lineage continues in its form so that other seekers may be enlightened through this pathway. They guard the scriptures, they guard the sanctity of the path, and they uphold themselves as also having attained God realization, being able to transmit something of their own awakening to the seeker. And that is through a practice that's called Shaktipat. I won't really get into that too much right now, but it's known as the descent of grace, and it's basically a formal initiation into the yoga lineage. So the true guru is just there to reflect back your own divinity, and also to, as I said, to protect the scriptures and to be a lineage holder. And also to prepare and train the next guru, the person who will be her successor. Again, so that the teachings can continue, so that more and more beings can be liberated. So there is also self-reliance. It's certainly not meant to be this path of I give over my own intelligence, my own autonomy. I just blindly worship. No, when we worship, it's so important to have the proper understanding. And, these are some of the differences, again, between 5-MeO and Kundalini, right? In 5-MeO, you don't do a lot of these practices, although it's certainly necessary to do some practice to integrate, to do some meditation and mindfulness and self-inquiry and things like that. Extraordinarily important, in fact, indispensable. However, you might not have practices such as chanting, such as japa, which is the repetition of mantras, with these beads and things like that. Sometimes that's done. And also ritual worship, oblations, right? Going around to all the different holy sites and making offerings. But in my school, what we've always known is that whenever these rituals are performed, they must be done with the right understanding. If they're not done with the correct understanding, they're meaningless, or they're something other than the highest truth, which is what we are working towards. So there are many ways of practicing in a dualistic form, in offering, oh my God, I praise you. You are so great. I worship you. What do you want me to do? I'll do anything. Just give me what I need and what I need to be happy and all that. That's a very dualistic way of approaching the divinity. However, in this form of yoga, which is Siddha Yoga, it's a form of, for instance, it's a form of Kashmir Shaivism, which is also a form of non-dual Shaiva Tantra, we could say. It would be like the overarching blanket that this falls under. And it is understood that whatever I'm offering oblations to, whatever I'm offering my surrender to, right? Whatever I'm offering my worship to is my own deepest self. It is none other than my own self, because if there are not two, that means there's only one. There are only one of us. And so all the practices we do and all of the self-inquiry that we do, everything that we do is done with the intention of realizing this for ourselves directly. So it's not about believing it. It's certainly not it doesn't do anyone any good to believe that they're God. I mean, let's just get that straight right off the bat. If you believe you're God, you are deluded. You are fucking delusional. And it's doing you no good. If you realize that you're God through spiritual practice or through 5-MeO DMT or through some other such form of grace, that is a transformation that brings about the most intense state of humility, of awe, of wonder. It is the farthest thing from ego. Because you realize that everything and everyone is that. You're not special. You, if anything, you are so special in that you have been given the opportunity to realize this. And that is only something to be more and more thankful for, and humility, and have more and more humility about. Because ultimately you could have just died never knowing this. You could be like the multitudes who never even get an inkling of any of this. Just thinking that life is just what you do. Which to me is a pretty pathetic use of a life. To not even wonder, what is it that I am truly? And to really deeply want to investigate that, but to just be distracted by shit. I mean, trust me, we all have been there, right? But at some point, I hope we all wake up and realize that there's something more meaningful going on here, something worth investigating inside. With an open mind and an open heart and a willingness to surrender to a depth that is, at this point, probably unimaginable. But anywho, so why would one want to surrender to a guru anyway? Well, the meaning of the word guru is the dispenser of darkness. It means one who dispenses darkness, or dispels darkness, rather. I'm sorry. One who gets rid of darkness. So the bringer of the light. And it may take the form of an external person, or a scripture, or a teaching, or an experience that you even had. You see, God doesn't need any particular circumstances to appear, to touch you, to affect you. He'll use whatever. It will use whatever. If you're ready and lucky enough. Well, if you're not lucky enough, you better be willing to do some work to make yourself lucky. That's something I think Ken Wilber talks about, and I know you've read his work, is that meditation is no guarantee, right, for enlightenment, right? Enlightenment is like an accident, but meditation makes you more accident prone. So anyways, why would one follow a guru? Well, only if that guru has offered you something that you have found to have incredible merit, has awakened something within you, has taught you something, has shown you something within yourself that expanded your consciousness, awoke you to a higher understanding of reality, a deeper understanding of reality. Maybe it was just an experience of freedom that you had in his presence or her presence, or reading her works. Maybe the mind suddenly stops. The mind stopped. I remember after practicing about, 6 months after studying the course that they were sending me while I was in prison. They were sending me this course every month, and I was studying it like you could not believe, because the teachings were impacting me. They were hitting me. I could feel there was some depth to this. I could feel there was real truth here and power. And I couldn't really explain it, but I could just sense it. It was an intuitive thing. But it also started to open up feelings inside. I remember the first time I felt this twinge of feeling in the center of my heart. And I was reading my lesson, and I felt this, just a tiny little prick of feeling in the center of my chest. I had never felt this before, at least never in my adult life. I couldn't remember ever having felt anything in that area at all my entire life. And I felt something, and I could directly feel it was a result of this course and the power behind it. And that made me that made me have respect. That I said, those are results. I mean, that's what I want. I want to be able to feel. I haven't felt anything in years. I've been so shut down. My emotions were so locked up. I couldn't feel anything. I was either angry, pissed off, or, all right, I'm okay. All right. Hadn't cried in, 10 years, 15 years, 20. At that point, so we're talking 17 years ago or so, and this stuff really starts to purify me. And I begin to have kriyas. And kriyas are these jolts of spiritual energy that just comes from the Kundalini being released in a massive, well, at least it could take many forms, but this is how I experienced it. It would release, it would hit a part of my body that was locked up, and it would make me twist. It would make me throw my leg out. And it would do this constantly, day and night. Once this started happening, it was like, oh shit, there's another one. And I could feel this, and I was learning how to let go, and I was learning how to surrender, because after a couple of years of practice and study, you start to pick up on these things. And so the more I let go, the more these jolts would hit me, and they'd make me, my legs would be crazy. I mean, for a while I was not comfortable being in public because I couldn't control my body. You know, I was like having like these mini seizures almost, although I wasn't losing, control in any other part of my body. I wasn't losing consciousness or falling down or anything like that. It wasn't like a seizure at all, but it was just like a spasm. It was like a uncontrolled spasm. But I could feel this energy in my body was doing it. So it wasn't a muscular spasm. I felt those before. They come and go every once in a while. We've all probably experienced them. No big deal. You give yourself a little massage and it kind of stops for most of us. But this was an energetic spasm, causing a physical reaction in my body that I could not really control. And if I tried to control it, I could try to control it. I could probably suppress it. I could suppress it for a while, but then why would I want to do that? I know this is purifying me. I can feel that it's cleaning me out. So as difficult as it is, and painful sometimes, uncomfortable, to have this constant jabbing at your pain, just dissolving it little by little with these sharp jolts of energy. Just, now you got this much pain, we're gonna take off that layer, and take off that layer, and take off that layer. Time and time and again, it's opening me up more and more and more. And this is going on for years and for years. It eventually got to the point to where I'm not going to go into a whole lot more because I want to get back and make sure we're staying on topic. But this is still very much on topic. But it eventually got to the point to where I couldn't bear it anymore. It's like I started drinking alcohol because I found that would suppress it. It just got to the point to where it was just too much. I mean, after years and years and years of this, and I mean, I'm opening up, I'm awakening more and more and more. But it was just like something in me I was experiencing. I went through a breakup in a relationship, my baby's mother, and it was very, very difficult for me emotionally. And I just couldn't take it anymore. I needed a break. And I started drinking daily at that point, and I suppressed this stuff for a couple of years doing that. Luckily, I came out of that. And I became willing to face whatever was inside of me. I became absolutely willing to surrender. So when you start to experience the power of these practices, when I started to experience the power, again, it just made my humility grow, my respect grow. But again, there were so many levels to come. I mean, I'm really just scratching the surface here. Because, in the last year in particular, things have ramped up incredibly. And all that stuff in the past was kind of like a lot of child's play compared to what's been going on. So as the heart opens more and more, and as my capacity grows, right? Because my capacity is directly related to resistance. And as I've been letting go of resistance more and more, I know you've talked about this. It's interesting how the language I've noticed has been similar in certain areas. And what I discovered a few months ago, actually maybe about 6 months ago, I was studying this very, very deeply. I was really examining the nature of the relationship between resistance and capacity. And I found that every experiment I run would prove this to be true over and over again. That my capacity was only limited by my resistance, my inner unwillingness to accept whatever it was. And the more I increased my willingness to accept and my ability to surrender, the more my resistance dissolved and the more my capacity increased naturally. My capacity for love, my capacity for truth, my capacity for compassion, my capacity for energy. All related to resistance. And I know you talked about the 5-MeO just burning through a lot of that stuff, just causing it all to become all of it, all your self-hatred, all the unwillingness to accept, right? All that stuff coming up, and you're seeing that God is accepting this for you until you can do it for yourself. That was really beautifully said, man. And I could feel my heart stretching while I was watching the video so many times. I could sense your genuineness and your sincerity and the reality of your experience, and it's resonating for me in my own experience, both in the past and in this present moment, as it starts to call up even deeper things, right? Even deeper feelings. I call up and realize, oh, that's not pure love. That's not pure acceptance. There's still some shit in there. And now I have the opportunity to love that also. One hour and 27 minutes, and you said love of God is what transforms you. Your capacity for love grows until you can love everything. And when you truly love everything, you are God. My own realization that I've been writing about in this book I've been working on, for instance, I've come up with these axioms, and one of them is that true fulfillment is non-dependent on anything or anyone. How could it be? That would mean separation. That would mean that there's other, that other is the most essential reality. That separation and otherness is the most essential reality, and unity and oneness is secondary. And I mean, how ridiculous is that? Another realization is that true empowerment, true surrender is empowerment. True surrender is empowerment. People think surrender is weak. It is not. If you are weak, you will not be able to surrender. Not in this way. That's why I say true surrender. True surrender is when a soldier gets the call of duty and he's right in the middle of something. He's right in the middle of lunch. He doesn't go, oh, well, I'm going to finish my lunch first because what I want is more important. No, he surrenders to the call of duty, and that empowers him. That empowers him to take great action. It empowers him to go for hours and hours on no sleep. It empowers him to do things that he could not otherwise do. If he was fighting himself, if he was resisting life inside and outside, he wouldn't be able to rise to the occasion. True surrender is empowerment also, because when you truly surrender, your ego dissolves and the true power of God rises within you. It comes to the surface. I surrender many times throughout the day. I let go of my body. I surrender it. Whoa, yeah, malach. I find my body does its own thing. It spouts the names of God like it just did. I surrender, and here's what happens. Yahweh, 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 Allah. I am Allah. I am Allah. I surrender. I surrender to that. I am Yahweh. I am Allah. That's a Kriya. Yahweh. Those Kriyas bringing forth the truth of who I am. And I am no different. I am no different from you, and I am no different from anyone watching this. We are all divinity. When you awaken to this realization, you will know that you are that. You are also that. It's not mine over here. It's within you. It is within me. It is within everything. It is everything. Yahweh. The ego is the belief in separation. So when the ego tries to become God, we have delusion, we have egomaniac, right? We have megalomaniac. The ego is trying to become God. It's trying to stretch itself to become everything. Ha 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 ha. No, that is not the reality. That's why humility is always present. Because it's recognizing that the deepest, innermost reality of what you are is God. And so is everyone else. There's only one reality, and that one reality has become everything. And I am that. I am that. And so are you. But again, it does no good to believe this. And as 5-MeO DMT brings about the experience of this, can bring about the experience of this to the open-minded, open-hearted person who has done some preparation, hopefully, and is taking this very, very seriously, isn't just out for a kick or a quick fix. This truth, this reality can be realized. Just as at 21:30, you talk about realizing your own conscious creation of everything, including your computer, all its circuitry, all the myriad manifest parts, that it's all just coming from your own consciousness, that you're creating all of it, every bit. This is the same realization that's talked about in Sutra number 1 of the Pratibhignya Hridayam, which is the teachings on the school of the heart of recognition, is an ancient scriptural text of Tantric Yoga, non-dual Shaiva Tantra, written by Kshemaraj over 1,000 years ago. And in his first sutra, he says, awareness, free and independent, is the cause of the performance of everything. And so that's what spiritual practice is about. When we encounter a deep truth, we have to begin to look at our own life and examine it. Am I living this truth? Is it true for me? Wherever it's not true, that's where the work is. That's where the work begins. Because the scriptures should ultimately just verify your own inner experience. They're not meant to be taken as some anecdotal evidence or some something to believe in, something to just take on blind faith, or something to say, oh, when I get to heaven, I'll reach that. But you have to work at seeing the reality of them, transforming your consciousness until that same reality is your own. That's when you can really begin to speak about it with power, because you know for yourself directly. I'm not trying to explain some biblical story in modern times to make it make sense and have some meaning for your life. No, this is about radically transforming your consciousness from one of a limited individual, separate from the world, separate from others, separate from God, an ego mind with all his own individual needs, wants, and desires, goals, aims. Going from that mind-identified state to an expanded state of self-realization, of realizing one's own self as none other than divinity, not an ego mind, not a mind-made self, beginningless, endless, pure consciousness. So there's been criticisms of your work and of non-duality in general, and of myself and others like me, by all sorts of people, religious folks. One person I came across, Powerful Thought Online on YouTube, this is his channel. He worried about the dangers of non-dualism, non-duality rather, and talked about how the fears of it becoming a nihilistic path. If everything is everything, he said, what is the point of any of it? What would be the point of the suffering? Why would we do anything? Why would the suffering be worth it if everything is everything? It's clear from this person's response that he has not experienced anything of what we were talking about. Yet. And I understand, I've been there. There's levels of awakening, for sure. And there are, just as there are levels of human consciousness that have been tracked. You know, we grow from being tribal to being national to being more global, to where we can accept all humans. You know, we can move beyond racial divides. We can accept all humans as essentially one with ourselves. So the reason the suffering is worth it, that question gets answered as you start to realize your true nature. The reason for all suffering begins to be explained. You start to accept it deeper and deeper. You realize that that suffering was all part of just getting you to awaken. It was just what you needed. And it was all love. And it was all you. You created that suffering. It was your own creation from your own resistance. Your inability to accept. You didn't have the capacity to love everything yet. So of course you'll suffer. You have to develop that capacity. It takes time. It takes effort. It takes practice. It takes compassion. It takes truth. It takes strength. It takes God. It takes empowerment. It takes love. It takes heart. It takes courage. You continually increase your capacity for love and your ability to love deeper and deeper and to love more and more. To be completely unwithheld with your love. I actually started a company called Unwithheld, and it was all based around this simple realization I had during meditation. You know, I was sitting there in a lotus posture, and I watched as I could see an image of myself floating in front of me, just appeared in front of me, and I watched as this light just excuse me. Oh, just getting a little dry throat. No corona. No corona. All right, so I watched as this light just struck this image of me right down the center, split me in two, and I just watched myself split apart like this. And inside was this light, this shimmering light. And these words were the words just came from the experience. I don't know, they just manifested all at once. I knew, saw, and heard all in that moment that there was never ever any good reason or any sane reason to withhold your love from anyone or anything, especially yourself. I could just see how that only shrunk our heart. It only cut us off from our power. And over the last several years, that realization's gotten deeper and deeper. Now I see how it's not even just with the heart, it's with all energy, but particularly with the heart, is the less and less we resist, the more our capacity grows. And how do we let go of resistance? Surrender. I mean, you can call it by many names, right? You could call it letting go. You can call it welcoming it, allowing it, creating space for it. It all boils down to surrender. So, I think I've touched on a good amount. I want to give my final analysis and conclusion is that 5-meo DMT is a catalyst. It's a catalyst to bring on God realization. It's a catalyst, it's a technology, just as Kundalini is a catalyst and a technology. Without Kundalini, I can't imagine how many lifetimes it will take for someone to have this realization. And while I personally have not ever taken 5-meo DMT, I have taken DMT in its other forms. And I've had over 100 trips, many hundreds of trips. But those all supported my awakening. My awakening was not dependent on any one of them per se. But they've all supported it. And it takes integration. It takes work. So even though 5-meo may be a powerfully incredible tool that gives you a rapid experience of God realization, you're still going to need to work to integrate that. If you don't, you run the risk of becoming a megalomaniac. I know that, Leo, you're not running that risk. I can sense everything you talked about, man, hit me directly in this inner recognition. Your ending point is the same as mine. Your beginning point is the same as mine. Let's talk about it. We both start at the level of truth. We both start as sincere seekers, as willing to cast aside all beliefs, to cast aside all past knowing, to go fresh with an open mind and an open heart, and to explore, to be radical psychonauts, deeply diving into the inner workings of our consciousness. And not just for the benefit of us, but then for the benefit of others, being able to share it. We're both starting there. Truth seekers. That is the highest aim. And throughout our seeking, however many years it's taken me, however long it's taken you, we both arrive at the same conclusion. God is love. I am love. I am God. And my path may continue to take me down the road to ultimately experimenting with 5-meo myself. If I do, I'll certainly report back my findings. I'll certainly be able to offer that first-hand comparison. I think most likely it is going to happen. It might take a year for the right circumstances to appear, for that to transpire. And I'm quite sure that it's going to be a powerful experience when it does happen. It probably will take my own realizations to a deeper level. So again, that's where we're at, and I'm not going to make any claims that I have the same or deeper realization. I will say that on a contextual level, though, we both began and ended at the same ultimate truth. And as you said, I also concur that that truth goes deeper and deeper and deeper forever and ever, infinitely and eternally. And that's what we all have to look forward to. So it is not a nihilistic fate. It is not a self-aggrandizement. It is not an ego trip. It is the depth of profundity. It is the deepest realization. It goes on forever and ever. And I just want to thank you again so much for your work, for your willingness to explore, for your courage, for your honesty, for your genuineness, and for your vulnerability in that last video especially. As I said, it touched my heart, and I hope that my viewers go out and watch it and it transforms them as well. I really enjoyed having this conversation, having this response, giving this response. I look forward to a response from you, Leo, or anyone else who would like to comment. I'm also happy to continue and further this discussion. It's what I'm about, so it's where we're going. More and more depth, more and more profundity, deeper realizations, more love, more courage, more bravery, more vulnerability, more sharing from the depths, more connection. If you got something from this video, go ahead and subscribe. Please consider liking, subscribing, hitting that alarm button, all that kind of thing. Really helps for work like ours to get to the top, to really be seen by more and more people, and to have an impact on this world, which is what we are all about. My friend Leo, all my friends out there in the interwebs, I love you all. I appreciate you so much. Thank you for being with me on this journey in whatever form it takes. I am so happy to continue on in the future. And I look forward to seeing you in another video real soon. And you know what? Matter of fact, I've got one coming up right now dealing with resistance. Keep in mind, folks, resistance is futile. You're going to learn a lot. Stick around and keep opening up to deeper and deeper realizations. Go check out Leo's site, Actualized.org. Go check out his YouTube channel. And, you know, props to you, my man. Show him some love, give him some appreciation as well. Really just give him some time, because he's going to help you to learn some things. He's going to help you to take some action steps that's going to transform you as an individual, and ultimately transform you from being an individual into something much, much greater. I love you all. I'll see you soon. Here's another one coming up.